After Trump's first 100 days, the best is yet to come on taxes, trade, and immigration as the president promises Biden overhang will pass. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Executive Director with Americans for Limited Government and Americans for Limited Government Foundation. Hit that subscribe button. Today, we're going to be talking a lot about President Trump's first 100 days. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to hear what the president had to say in Warren, Michigan, just a few days ago. It's a very good clip, and he's talking about positioning America to be strong in the world economy vis-a-vis our relationship, trade with China and other trade partners, and how we're going to get a better deal for the American people on trade. But it's also more than just about our economic borders. We have our sovereign borders, and we need to protect our borders. And President Trump is doing an extraordinary job of sealing the border with numbers we've never seen, numbers so low in terms of encounters on the southwest border. So I think the president is doing a very good job. And right now, everyone's starting to talk a lot about the economy. And this is very important and certainly nothing to be ignored. The economy is one of the reasons why President Trump lost his first election. He had a COVID recession. It's one of the reasons why he won his second, opportunity to be reelected in 2024. Joe Biden had a very weak economy, and the American people felt that Trump did a better job on the economy when he was in office. And certainly inflation was lower, and we didn't have a lot of the high prices, trying to jam down oil production on purpose, do Green New Deal kinds of stuff. But let's hear what President Trump had to say in Warren, Michigan. I thought this was a very good speech. It's well worth listening to. Make sure the volume's up good.
We're taking back our country from a sick political class that got rich selling America out and bleeding America dry. We don't let that happen anymore. And we had 4 great years. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. The stock market went up 88%. We did great. And we're going to do better now, because now we learned a little bit. After years of leaders who sent your money to defend the borders of distant foreign nations, that's what we did. We'd fight for other nations, but not for ourselves. You finally have a president who is defending our borders and our nation. After decades of politicians who destroyed Detroit to build up Beijing, you finally have a champion for workers in the White House. And instead of putting China first, I'm putting Michigan first, and I'm putting America first. After a lifetime of unelected bureaucrats stealing your paychecks, attacking your values, and trampling your freedoms, we are stopping their gravy train, ending their power trip, and telling thousands of corrupt, incompetent, and unnecessary deep state bureaucrats, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired. Get out of here. In 100 days, we have delivered the most profound change in Washington in nearly 100 years. I read an editorial today that this is the most consequential presidency in history. How about that? And it wasn't even by a group that would normally be supporting us. It was a group of people that I think they tend to be on the liberal side, but they said it's the most important election, the November 5th, that changed it all. You have to see when you hear some of these numbers, but that is the most consequential election that we've ever had in our country. And what a nice thing. I'm going to start again subscribing to that particular paper. Even if I don't read it much, I'm going to subscribe. But it was a very nice compliment, especially from them. They know who I'm talking about. We're ushering out the long reign of special interests and the radical left lunatics, and we're ushering in the golden age of America. That's what we have.
Okay, we can kind of stop there. It gives you a flavor for what President Trump was saying at the Warren, Michigan rally to celebrate his first 100 days in office. And I wanted to kind of shift and talk a little bit about the president's budget bill and his, tax, it's going to include tax cuts, no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security. It should include factory expensing so that companies have an incentive to build factories in America, to make products in America. That will go alongside the president's tariff policies that are going to naturally shift production away from overseas and have companies who want to take advantage of these tax incentives to build stuff here in America and to make made in America a permanent feature of our economy in the 21st century. I think that's where we're headed, because I don't think Democrats are going to be able to undo the policies. Democrats are going to want to compete in Warren, Michigan. They're going to want to compete in Pennsylvania. They're going to want to compete in Wisconsin, and they're not going to be able to afford to go backwards on trade with the policies that President Trump has put forward that I believe will benefit this country over the long term. We'll see here, but I wanted to actually go to this Truth Social post. This was on the day that we got the GDP numbers, which weren't so great. I had negative 0.3% in the first quarter. That's January, February, and March. And that was prior to the reciprocal tariffs, for example, coming into, being enacted on April 2nd. And so this actually takes account, I think, of where the economy was prior to Trump taking office. But there's also other factors, for example, people front loading imports in anticipation of the trade agenda. Imports come out of GDP. Just as we measure it here. And here was President Trump's reaction. He says, this is Biden's stock market, not Trump's. I didn't take over until January 20th. Tariffs will soon start kicking in, and companies are starting to move into the U.S. in record numbers. Our country will boom, but we have to get rid of the Biden overhang. This will take a while, has nothing to do with tariffs, only that he left us with bad numbers. But when the boom begins, it will be like no other. Be patient. So President Trump is noting here, taking account that, the economy is rather weak heading into the first quarter of 2025. We get a negative number, 0.3% annualized. It's rather flat, if anything. But, you come off peak inflation in 2022. Usually within a couple of years of peak inflation, you're going to see a recession. And we've been over these numbers in the past. So I'll jump into my piece and we can start going over that. President Trump's reaction on Truth Social on April 30th to the latest data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, showing a slight 0.3% annualized decrease of the gross domestic product in the first quarter of 2025 that ended March 31 prior to the president's April 2 announcement of reciprocal tariffs. Here, Trump is suggesting that there is a Biden overhang in the economy, and he's got a point. Under former President Joe Biden, the economy saw peak inflation at 9.1% in June of 2022 and subsequent unsurprising increase in unemployment from 5.7 million in 2023 to 7.1 million now. It's actually a 1.4 million increase that we see in unemployment. And these are the numbers. You go back to the past 10 years, you see where COVID is. So it kind of makes it harder to make sense of what you have here. So we'll go to the past 5 years. And here was the low of unemployment at 5.7 million. And after peak inflation, that occurs in June of 2022, you get to peak employment at and the low of unemployment. And then thereafter, as the wind comes out of the economy, unemployment starts ticking up very steadily towards the end of the Biden administration. And by the time Joe Biden is leaving office, it's at about 6.8 million. And then in February, 7 million, and it hit about that in November, 7.1 million. And now you're at a high of 7.16 million. That's the highest it's been since April of 2021. But this is a few years in the making. Unemployment's been rising for well over 2 years now. So, the economy's been weakening for well over 2 years now. People knew the economy was pretty darn crappy during the Biden administration. That's why they voted for President Trump. And now Trump is going to inherit some of Biden's numbers, I think, as far as political approval goes on the economy. Now, the first signals of a slowdown or recession, I believe, came in 2022 when the spread between 10-year and 2-year treasuries first inverted. And then the signal for higher unemployment came in 2023 when the inversion began narrowing until the yield curve normalized in 2024. So here's the 10-year, 2-year treasury. This is the spread between 10-year treasuries and 2-year treasuries, the difference between them. When you get an inversion, that's when usually you have the long rate is going to be higher than the short rate. But when the short rate, the 2-year, goes higher than the long rate, the 10-year, this usually precedes recessions. And you can see it kind of going back here, it goes negative every time you get a recession, usually beforehand. And then as you come out, as it uninverts, that's when you see unemployment tend to rise. And that's been true over the past 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 recessions. As you see a spike in the 10-year, 2-year, you see a spike in unemployment. Well, guess what? We've been seeing a spike in the 10-year, 2-year since about 2023. And then look at that. Unemployment's been rising very much like clockwork. You can even see it. Let's see if we can go down to 2021 here. 2021, try 2022. And you can kind of see it here. The low in 2023 of unemployment occurs right here. And then as the 10-year, 2-year is rising, so is the unemployment rate. And that's just pretty much like clockwork. So I note these signals in the economy, and if this has been rising for 2 years, unemployment's been rising for 2 years. Well, President Trump just took office a few months ago, so what's happening in the economy is several years in the making, and I just want to cover that because it's an important point. So this is what usually happens following peak inflation, given the historical inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. So you can see here the inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. You get peak inflation, and then you get peak unemployment that follows on its heels. And then as inflation tends to go down, employment will go up. You want to see employment going up when inflation's going down. When you see inflation going down, you'll see unemployment go up. So that's just generally what happens. The wind out of the economy. There's an inverse relationship between these two things. The consumer price index. So if you get peak inflation, expect peak employment to follow on its heels. And then you're gonna get and then unemployment's gonna go up. And so we had peak inflation in 2022. Well, what usually happens is you get a recession 2 or 3 years down the road. You would see a recession. So I think that's what we're going to see happening potentially here. You see a weak first quarter number. You get 2 quarters of negative growth. Coupled with higher unemployment, you could see it booked as a recession. In the current instance, the American people are also seeing consumer credit owned and securitized contracting. The good news is that this usually happens at the tail end or following a recession. So it could be that the contraction or slowdown already being experienced simply has not been fully booked by the Bureau of Economic Research. But you still want to keep an eye on something like this. This is consumer credit owned and securitized. Federal Reserve keeps track of this. When you see consumer credit contracting, usually indicates a slowdown in spending. And right now it's an outright contraction. In fact, it was an outright contraction when Joe Biden was still in office. So again, a negative economic signal that was already in place prior to President Trump taking office. So it's kind of like, oh, what do we do about this? Well, you're going to extend and expand the Trump tax cuts. You're going to try to put some stimulus into the economy so that if we do have the worst, if the recession does happen, then Congress is doing what it's supposed to do and getting the economy on a firm footing for a recovery. Now, regardless of the timing of whether we call it a recession, does unemployment go up enough? That's a good question. The increase in unemployment we've already seen the past 2 years, along with slowing inflation, is real enough. Interest rates are also dropping. So if you take a look at the 10-year treasury this year, let's see. Oh, no, is it going to? Oh, it wants me to do ad blocker. I have to get rid of the ad blocker. Sorry, guys. Let's see. We'll just turn it off and hit refresh. We want to look at the 10-year treasuries. There we go. And it's loading right now, so we'll let that load for a second. But generally speaking, the interest rates have been dropping this year. It's up a little bit today, but let's see, how far back does this go? Okay, so yeah, there's 2025, and there was the peak at 4.8%. And you're seeing, along with inflation, you're seeing interest rates come down. And that's going to be helpful for mortgage rates. You see commodities coming down, crude oil. This is going to factor into gas prices getting much, much lower. And crude oil is way down, way down. Let's pull up a chart on that so you can see how this has been going. It's going to take a minute to load, so I do apologize for that. I see here, we want to go up top. Can I smooth this out a little? It's going to let me. Yeah, we want to go to 1 hour. And then we want to, well, you can see in February it was at about $72, and now it's down to $58. So when you boost production, you're going to see oil prices come down, commodities are coming down, interest rates are coming down. This is also what tends to happen towards the tail end of cycles. You'll note that during COVID, for example, oil crashed. So just no demand whatsoever. So oil prices actually went negative. And during the 2008, 2009 recession, we also saw, I believe oil got down to about $40. So you could be seeing low oil prices at the tail end of an economic cycle. So something to keep your eye on. Again, you're seeing a little negative economic growth here in the first quarter of 2025. So maybe we are heading towards a recession. All this projects not just lower inflation expectations, but lower growth expectations on the horizon. So the U.S. could be in for a bumpy ride in the near term. But as President Trump stated, this will take a while, but that after that, quote, when the boom begins, it will be like no other. Meaning the best days are yet to come. Congress is still working on the president's historic tax cut package that will include no tax on tips, overtime, and Social Security, as well as factory expensing. Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent was just speaking about factory expensing. That this is very important to fully incentivize companies to make good on the trillions of dollars of commitments to make their products in America and to shift away from China. As far as the reciprocal tariffs go with other trade partners, the U.S. is also in talks with South Korea, India, and Japan, with some deals expected soon that could dramatically alter the outlook. So President Trump raises the reciprocal tariffs. He says, we're going as high or near as high as you've been tariffing us, and we want to have trade negotiations. We want to get better trade deals. You should be treating America exports, much more fairly, and then maybe he'd be willing to lower the tariffs. I bet you they're still a little bit higher than before he started, but he still wants to make trade deals with our trade partners, and also to kind of isolate China and to shift production away from China. I think that's important when it comes to high tech. You want to, for national security reasons, get more chip production, computer production, electronics production into the United States. You see massive investments going on. And so we covered his April 29 rally, celebrating his first 100 days in office in Warren, Michigan, a state he carried twice in 2016 and 2024. Good luck carrying Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin without Trump's trade agenda those years. And Republicans would do well to remember that one of the reasons they're in power right now is because President Trump won the election on his twin message of stopping illegal immigration and securing America's economic borders with higher tariffs and getting tough on China. Trump added that the bureaucrats who had overseen the outsourcing of America are being fired. You're fired. Get the heck out of here. Get the hell out of here. I think that's funny. But President Trump's right. We have a new agenda right now, and the people who were enacting the old agenda, well, they're being shown the doors. We're reducing the federal workforce right now, too. In the meantime, the president continues to make historic gains in securing the southern border, with his plan to militarize the border, with U.S. troops paying handsome dividends as border encounters are now down to their lowest levels ever recorded. Here's Southwest border encounters. And you can see here it's down into the 11,000s. We've never seen it this low. We have data going back to the year 2000 from the Office of Immigration Statistics, and it's never been this low. So President Trump militarizing the border, putting the military on the border, using the Roosevelt Corridor, invoking a national emergency, invoking the Alien Enemies Act. All of this is helping to deter immigration into the United States and is the most secure border in American history. President Trump does not have to worry about facing re-election in 2028, meaning he can take the bold actions that he campaigned on, promises made, promises kept, that he believes in the long term will position the U.S. to be stronger and more prosperous. His message to his supporters is to be patient. In 2024, the American people took another chance on Donald Trump, and the president is promising that the best is yet to come. And I say, stay tuned. And I also wanted to cover our statement this morning on unemployment. It's a very good jobs report that we saw today from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And why don't we pull that up? Just real quick here, just go straight to the numbers. So yeah, payroll employment rises to 177,000 by 177,000 in April. The unemployment rate remains unchanged. It's actually up slightly. And I want to get into this. But pulling down the numbers here, you go to the household data. I prefer to look at the household report because that's where you get the unemployment rate from. You're going to look at the civilian labor force. It increased by 518,000 to 171.1 million. The amount of people employed, that increased by 436,000 to 163.9 million. This is an all-time high. There have never been more Americans who say they have jobs than right now. And then you also saw an increase, 82,000 in those saying they're unemployed. 7.16 million. I was covering that earlier, that the unemployment level hasn't been this high. You see April 2025. We have to go all the way back to, let's see, 6.7, 7.2. You have to go back to October of 2021, when that's the last time that the unemployment level was this low. Or this high, I should say. And so let's jump into my statement here. The unemployment level inched up to 7.16 million in April, the highest it's been since October of 2021. Now up 1.4 million since its January 2023 low of 5.7 million. And then if you look at the non-rounded unemployment rate, so the BLS, they'll use rounding. So if it's at 4.15, they'll say that's 4.2. If it's at 4.18, they'll say that's 4.2. And so it's like, oh, the unemployment rate is unchanged. But I'm saying, no, it's up ever so slightly from 4.15% last month to 4.18% this month. Still near historic lows. For full employment would be considered something around 5%. And the unemployed to jobs opening ratio reached 0.984. What's the unemployed to job openings ratio? Well, job openings and unemployed. So when unemployment is, if there's more unemployed people than there are job openings, you see this number go up. And then and that's usually during a recession. And then after the recession, you see that number go down, as we did after the Great Recession here. After the 2001 recession, you see that number come down. After the COVID recession, you see that number come down. And then in recent years, we've been seeing that you get fewer unemployed people than there are job openings. In other words, there are more job openings in certain circumstances. And even right now, that's still true. There's more job openings than there are people to fill them. That's because we have labor shortages, because the baby boomers are retiring en masse, and we also have low fertility. So this is a recent phenomena where you see more job openings than unemployed. But during recessions, you'll see this number kind of creeping up and going up. And right now, it's been going up since 2022. So the economy and labor markets have been weakening for over 2 years now. And it's about to have more unemployed than there are job openings. So I'd say, oh, wow, you're pretty much looking at peak employment here right now. So I just wanted to show you what this ratio is, because I think this is interesting. You actually have to calculate this. If you use the St. Louis Fed, they have a great website, and you can actually calculate things. if you add, customize your data, you add what data you want. So I'm doing unemployment divided by job openings to create this ratio. And then you just say A divided by B, and then you can produce the formula. So St. Louis Fed has got a great website if you want to try to analyze economic data. That's what I tend to use here. Makes it understandable. I hope this is understandable. But yeah, the unemployed to jobs openings ratio reached 9.984. It's its highest level since April of 2021. And this, again, is a figure that usually rises after peak employment at the end of the economic cycle and has been rising since 2022, along with unemployment. In the meantime, those saying they have jobs increased to 163.9 million, an all-time high. And then with inflation continuing to cool and payroll employment slowing down too on its trend, the only question is whether the economy is in for a so-called soft landing or a hard one. Again, we're looking at commodities prices continuing to go down. Inflation has been cooling, for a couple of years now. It just didn't cool down quick enough to help Joe Biden or Kamala Harris win the election in 2024, mostly because inflation had outpaced incomes during their term in office, and that was fatal, not just for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, but also Gerald Ford in 1976, Jimmy Carter in 1980, and George Herbert Walker Bush in 1992, who lost to Bill Clinton. So I say Congress should not take any chances. It has before it a tax cuts bill that if everything the president has proposed is included, including no taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security, along with factory expensing to incentivize businesses to make their products in America, will set the economy up for the long term if the worst should happen and we get a recession. Now, if there is any good news about the labor shortages brought on by the baby boomer retirement wave, and let me pull that up for you just so you can see what I'm talking about here. Let's see, not in labor force, with no disability, 65 years and over. And this has been increasing from 19 million seniors that are not in the labor force so people over the age of 65, not in the labor force, has increased from 19 million in 2008 to 33 million in 2025. It's been increasing by a little less than a million per year. And that's a lot of retirees. This is the baby boomer retirement wave, just going up, 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 up. And it's going to keep on going up. The amount of people who are 55 to 64 right now, it's over 20 million. So you're going to see this number jump up. The amount of people collecting Social Security, Medicare, that number is going to almost double. It's going to go up very substantially, and along with the budget deficit and along with the national debt, it's going to skyrocket. There's no stopping it. And so along with, but if there's a silver lining to that, it's that because of the retirements, there'll be fewer people to be laid off. And so when we do get a recession, hopefully unemployment doesn't go so high. It could just be that because of the retirements, we either skip the next recession, or if we get one of this shallow, hope springs eternal. And so you hope for the best, you prepare for the worst. Either way, whatever is on the horizon has been years in the making following peak inflation in 2022. And so all Congress can do is set the U.S. up for future success the best it can. It's time to extend the tax cuts. And that was another piece I had here. Go big or go home. It's time to, these jobs numbers, the GDP report, this is a reminder for Congress to extend the tax cuts. Plus, let's do factory expensing to make stuff here in America, and no taxes on tips, overtime, and Social Security. And I think, President Trump, he's going to need your help to, encourage your members of Congress to get going on the budget bill. It's already, they've already got the budget bill passed in both chambers, and now they're working on reconciliation. And they're going to, you want to see no taxes on tips, overtime, Social Security. You want to see factory expensing. Let your member of Congress know. But this is Robert Romano, Executive Director with Americans for Limited Government and Americans for Limited Government Foundation. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day. But I wanted to bring up your chats here before we run away. I do thank you for tuning in. And for everyone who's talking, let's see, we got some ankle biters in the chats here. We've got the Joker, says, eggs are still too expensive with Donald Trump. Yeah, eggs are down like 58, 60, I think over 60% now from their peak prices. But that's what I expect the Joker to say. You can't fool me. I know my Batman. Let's see, Norvell Walker. What is it? What is it to you? You live in Mexico, he says. Like I said, some ankle biters. Thank you, Norvell, for your comment. Chuck Krause says smaller government means less taxes. No taxes puts monies back into the hands of the American people on fixed income. The working class of new generations are going to have to learn to be productive in order to keep a job. Children, the writing is on the wall. And yeah, I agree that less taxes is going to put more money back in the pockets of the American people. And we want to do that not just for young people, people who are working, tips workers, people working overtime. We also, seniors who are collecting Social Security, you shouldn't have to pay taxes on that. You already paid taxes to collect the benefit in the first place. Doesn't seem very fair. Now, that's probably going to increase the deficit a little. So we should, maybe you make the federal employees pay a little bit more, higher contributions in their retirements. That's a proposal that's coming out of the Oversight Committee right now. But when you advocate for that, then suddenly federal employees are sending you emails, night letters, and saying, "Don't cut my benefits. I was promised these benefits." It's like, well, you're in the private sector. People, there are adjustments. Employee retirement plans, they can be changed. The terms and conditions under which that can be changed. Congress gets to set those rules. Congress makes the laws of the land, and Congress can make federal employees pay a little bit more, and they can make it so that seniors pay a little bit less when they retire. I think that's fair. Make the federal employees pay their fair share. Margot Kubik says the chickens left are growing as fast as they can after Biden had 100 million killed so that they don't catch the bird flu. And so, I think that the egg prices are going down. Prices in general have been, inflation's been, peak inflation was in June 2022 at 9.1%. And so now you're down to less than 3%. I think with commodities prices continuing to crater, interest rates coming down, that inflation expectations are falling. And so it could be time for the Federal Reserve to start cutting interest rates. Generally speaking, the federal funds rate is well north of the consumer inflation rate right now. And you want to soak up that money that you printed after COVID. And the money supply hasn't grown in a couple of years now with the higher interest rates. And so now, finally, we're seeing prices collapse. I think that's what, if you have to take your choice, if you're President Trump, would you rather see higher inflation or a recession? I would choose the recession because that usually means prices are going down in every single recession. And as a matter of fact, prices have gone down over the past century. You don't want to see deflation per se, but you want to see the inflation rate come down to a more sustainable level, and you want to see incomes be above that of inflation. When inflation's above that of incomes, it's usually bad for just for the country. It's bad for the American people, and then people will say, "Vote the bums out." So no one's immune to inflation. No politician is immune to it. And I think President Trump is committed to bringing prices down. And you see oil down to $58, probably a really good sign that inflation is going to continue to cool in the coming days. But again, this is Robert Romano. I want you all to have a great weekend. I'm the executive director with Americans for Limited Government and Americans for Limited Government Foundation. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.